Hello, my name is Lauren and welcome to a new year on the Theoretical YouTube channel. As you all know, the final film in the Star Wars nonology is finally here, and it left us all with some pretty big questions. Like, why can't critics and audiences just agree on something? Alright, cats. Anyway, Rise of Skywalker had its moments, and some of the most interesting involved two characters that we have come to love over the last 42 years. Sheev and Rey Palpatine. Spoilers! Right, there are spoilers in this video. But in my defense, you clicked on a Rise of Skywalker theory, and while both Daisy Ridley and Ian McDiarmid gave some pretty great performances, I have an issue with the film's climax. Darth Sidious here thinks he can just offer Rey the title of a Sith. And sure, maybe he could just hand over his emperorship, but I think it takes a few more steps in order to become a Sith Lord. But what are those steps? Was Rey really on the path to becoming a Sith all along? And most importantly, could Rey have actually accepted Palpatine's offer? Okay, like I said before, spoilers. Everything that could possibly be spoiled about this movie is probably evidence in this video. Okay, to start at the very beginning, what is a Sith? Because The Rise of Skywalker uses that term a lot and kind of just assumes that every Star Wars fan is on the same page here. We're taken to a Sith planet, Sith say language now, there's this Sith dagger, and we learned about the Sith Eternal. We're also introduced to a non-Force sensitive Sith in the form of the assassin Ahch-to who killed Rey's parents. But what exactly were the Sith? Were they a race, a creed, a nation, a convention for black clothing appreciation? Basically, if you were to explain it to someone who had never seen a Star Wars movie, you could boil it down to the bad guys. The Jedi use the light side of the Force, while the Sith embrace the dark side, therefore we have a dichotomy of good and evil. But in reality, the definition of a Sith is actually more complex, and therefore more interesting. Both the Sith and the Jedi are religions that evolved around individuals who were not only Force sensitive, but also Force users. Yes, the main difference between the two is that they either use the light or the dark parts of the Force, but as a concept, the two are remarkably similar. And honestly, what is the difference between light and dark Force powers and how they're acquired? With some exceptions like telekinesis, most Force powers generally fall on either side of this supposed line between light and dark. The light side has stuff like Force Spirit, Force Serenity, and the Jedi Mind Trick, while the dark side has much cooler abilities like Force Choke, Force Scream, Force Slow, and Force Lightning.
Even you.
We'll come back to that last one. But what's important to note here is that Force users aren't Sith because they choose to use dark side abilities. Rather, it's by orienting one's relationship to the Force with the Sith's beliefs and practices that unlock these abilities. So therefore, Sith aren't just Force users who turn to the dark side. There's something that fundamentally separates them from the Jedi. And that is the two religions' attitudes towards emotion. But what's counterintuitive is that it's the Jedi who actively reject these essential aspects of human nature. Jedi are trained to reject things like emotion, ignorance, passion, chaos, and death in favor of peace, knowledge, serenity, harmony, and the Force. They're not allowed to have close relationships with friends or family. They're not allowed to have a great deal of passion about anything.
Attachment leads to jealousy. The shadow of greed, that is.
Not fear, not anger, not hate, not suffering, but also not love or a sense of self-pride. The Sith, on the other hand, revel in these strong emotions. A reading is from the Sith Code. Peace is a lie, there is only passion. Through passion I gain strength, through strength I gain power, through power I gain victory, through victory my chains are broken, the Force shall set me free. The Sith's core beliefs lie in accepting one's desires and following instincts and urges. Of course, because they're the villains, this is painted as hedonistic. And instead of love or friendship, the emotions that they choose to fuel are anger and vengeful resentment. But on the other hand, the Jedi are also wrong. By the end of their legacy, they had become a cold, unfeeling bureaucracy bent on politics and, ironically, power. There is definitely some truth to Luke Skywalker's disillusionment with the Jedi Order during his self-imposed exile to Ahch-to.
The Jedi are romanticized, deified.
But if you strip away the myth and look at their deeds, the legacy of the Jedi is failure. Hypocrisy, hubris.
That's not true.
What are the Jedi and the Sith but two religions that both forgot what they originally stood for in the first place? So based on all that context, what about Rey? Could she have conceivably accepted Palpatine's offer to become a Sith Lord based on her journey through these films? Well, first we have to know what it takes to become a Sith Lord, not just a follower of the religion. And no, it's not a red lightsaber. So, Star Wars research is really complicated because Disney pretty much retconned 35 years of lore in one blind sweep with the purchase of Lucasfilm. So most of what we know about the Sith and the dark side is now considered Star Wars legends. Bits and pieces of lore have been recovered by Disney's canon, but it's still hard to tell what's supposed to be left up for future interpretation. But from what I can tell, what I have to say in this video doesn't stray too far over that hazy gray line. Okay, so there's a Star Wars character named Tolaris Shim who was a Jedi Master during the Great Sith War, an event that took place over 4,000 years before A New Hope. Which, yes, I think is legends, but also probably maybe happened? Just go with it. Shim is most notable for her thesis on how Force users turn to the dark side, called the 4 stages of the dark side. Those stages are temptation, imperilment, submission, and redemption/atonement. Since we see the complete transformation of Anakin Skywalker into Darth Vader, we can use him as an example through each of these stages. Temptation is pretty straightforward. It's a curiosity or leaning towards high emotions. Anakin's rage at his mother's killers and his love for Padme were the first inclinations that he was straying from the Jedi path. Sheev Palpatine was able to use his temptations to lead him further towards the dark side. But imperilment is more than just desire. It's actually walking the thin line between light and dark. Imperilment also requires the constant justification for one's actions. Anakin's fear that he would lose Padme was enough motivation for him to seek out the dark side for a solution. Yet he uses his good intentions to balance out his moral objections to the Sith's reputation. But the next stage of submission is when justification becomes no longer necessary because the former Jedi has turned themselves completely over to the dark side. Anakin Skywalker killed Sand People and their children in revenge for his mother's murder. Darth Vader killed younglings because he was asked. The Sith don't have to justify their horrible actions for righteous reasons. Their freedom comes from not having one to begin with. The final stage is redemption or atonement, which is really just coming back to the light side. When Darth Vader gives his life to save his son, Darth Sidious and the dark side loses their grip on him. But surely Rey isn't going through these stages, unless you count pretty much everything she does in the series.
That's not true.
Rey's character is not peaceful, is not naturally attuned to the light side. She's passionate and desperate. That is her strength. Fundamentally, Rey is driven by the desire to know who she is and why. These are the questions that haunt her every choice. And it's what pulls her to the Force every single time. Consider all the way back in Force Awakens when Rey has her first Force dream and finds the Skywalker lightsaber. The very first thing that catches her attention and draws her away from everyone else is the sound of her own voice screaming for her parents to come back. And then a ton of stuff happens, but what's important is these two things. What ultimately attracts Rey is answers to her identity and what happened the day her parents left. And, as Obi-Wan says, these are her first steps. Whatever relationship Rey develops with the Force is rooted in this event and these feelings. Not to mention the fact that we've never seen a Force dream that wasn't temptation to join the dark side. Later on, the very first time we actually see Rey interact with the Force is during her interrogation with Kylo Ren. And when Rey begins to take back control, she isn't serene or peaceful. In fact, she's angry, vengeful, and using Ren's insecurities as a weapon herself.
But you will never be as strong as Darth Vader.
And then there's her first lightsaber battle in which she uses the Force to beat a wounded opponent. Yes, there is this seeming moment of peace when she finally connects to the Force, but the rest of the battle is marked by her seething rage towards Ren. And ends with her cutting his face open and leaving him bleeding in the snow on a planet she knows is about to blow up. And the rest of her choices in Force Awakens, like joining the Resistance and leaving to go find Luke, are a result of her passion for the other people in her life. Her relationships with BB-8, Finn, Leia, and Han Solo are also core pieces of her character. Besides answers, what Rey wants most is meaningful relationships with other people.
I'm so lonely. So afraid to leave.
And why she finds Kylo Ren so deplorable is partly because he throws those relationships away. The most evil she finds in him isn't the hundreds he's murdered or his part in the First Order's systematic oppression of the galaxy. To her, his greatest crime was killing his father, a man she respected and had a paternal bond with herself.
I feel like he's the father you never had. He would have disappointed you.
Get out of my head.
All these little clues are even more obvious in The Last Jedi. This is Luke's light side training.
Concentrate. Feel the Force flow.
This is how Rey trains herself. Not to mention that jetting off to Ahch-to was an impulsive decision that any Jedi should have been wary of. Then there's the second time the Force calls to her.
It's calling me.
And once again, it's not the light side calling.
You went straight to the dark.
Rey wants results. When Luke and the Jedi aren't able to give her what she wants, she explores other avenues.
That place was trying to show me something.
It offered something you needed. And you didn't even try to stop yourself.
When she can't find answers there, she turns to Kylo Ren, another arm of the dark side's influence. Yes, Rey's quest is for knowledge, but it's deeply personal in a way that the Jedi never supported. They were all about the universal collection of knowledge for the greater good. A Jedi isn't really an individual, they're absorbed into the Order to serve a purpose for the galaxy. But what drives Rey through her training is the desire to know who she is, to claim a last name and an identity of her own. And then there's Rise of Skywalker, and obviously a ton of moments where the film was pushing Rey down a darker path. But I only want to talk about one. The scene where she uses Force Lightning, a power that we already know is exclusively a dark side ability. But even if everything so far has just been temptation, this is the moment that Rey enters imperilment. During her tug-of-war with Kylo Ren, we watch Rey go through the full spectrum of the Sith code. It is her passion for Chewbacca that gives her the strength to fight Ren's ability. And that strength becomes the power of Force Lightning, which erupts from her fingertips and gives her victory. Moreover, her fear of losing a friend becomes anger, becomes hate, becomes suffering when she wins but loses the friend anyway. This is my favorite scene of the movie. It sets up Palpatine's offer as an actual possibility for Rey to submit to the dark side and fully become a Sith. But okay, let's zoom out for a second. Because so far we only know what it takes to become a Sith in the Jedi's perspective. Telara Shim's theory isn't actually the process that the Sith use to select, train, and initiate new members, so what's the other half of the story? Once again, I may be stepping into legends here, but this is the only information I could find from the Sith's point of view. Sith training has three major components: lightsaber combat, Force abilities, and the final assessment. As for Rey, her Jedi training actually covers pretty much all of the lightsaber combat skills that she would need to become an effective Sith Lord. And she clearly has a natural skill with the dark side, either as a result of her bloodline or as a powerful user in her own right. So what is this final assessment? Some people call it the sacrifice. Basically, you have to kill someone that you love in order to show an unchallenged allegiance to the Sith, to prove that you're willing to do anything. And you know what? Rey might have passed this one too. I know, it sounds crazy, but let's take a look at exactly what she does throughout the final movie. And everyone she hurts. One of the very first things we see her do in this film is get lost in her training and accidentally drop a tree on BB-8. Which seems like the most random thing, but not when you notice that this pattern happens over and over again throughout the film. In the process of pursuing some Force-related goal, Rey loses control or gives in to her desires, and someone around her gets hurt. First it's BB-8, but it's alright because his injuries are easy enough to fix. Then she blows up the transport ship that everyone thinks Chewbacca is on, killing him in the process, but it's alright because he was actually on another ship. Then she kills Kylo Ren, but I guess it's alright because she immediately regrets it and then transfers some of her own life force to save him. Except it's not alright because Leia died too, and yes, it is Rey's fault. Leia stepped in to try and save both Rey and her son. She couldn't have predicted that it would actually be Rey who was willing to strike after the fight had stopped. Rey's emotions blinded her to Leia's sacrifice and almost made it in vain. So, when Rey's on Exegol and Palpatine offers to give her his empire, could she have taken the deal? I think so. But there's one more sacrifice that she would have to make before truly turning over to the dark side. And it's the one he suggests. She has to kill him. Because he's not just the villain. He's not just the Sith she has to seize power from. He's her grandfather. Because what Rey has wanted for her entire life is a family. He's asking her to kill that dream. The thing she has loved more than anything else. And for her character, it is the right decision, because it's being weighed against her friends' lives. Because the Jedi choice is to let them all die. After all, they don't have any personal connections. These people's lives don't mean more than her own integrity. If it weren't for Ben Solo and Rey's lingering connections to the light side, this film might have had a very different ending. So yeah, Darth Rey is definitely possible. I liked Rise of Skywalker. Then again, I also unironically loved The Crimes of Grindelwald, so maybe my opinion is broken? Hey! What'd you think of this video? Star Wars is such a hard beast to research, but if you liked what we cobbled together, you can head down below and leave us a like and subscribe to the channel. And I guarantee if you comment, we will read whatever you send us. So, how's your day going? You can also follow us on Twitter at Theory_Central to join an elite force of people who are definitely not a cult. But that is all I have for you today, so thanks for watching. This is definitely not the last Star Wars movie, and I'll see you later.
I feel something.
You feel it?
Yes, I feel it.
That's the Force.
Really?
Wow, it must be really strong
Oh,
with
I've
you.
never felt any...